Hello and welcome. I'm Crawford McCarty, Senior Director of Marketing here at Verusen, and I want to welcome you to this webinar presentation of 5 key strategies to level up your manufacturing. Quick note, there will be a Q&A at the end of this presentation, so audience members are encouraged to submit questions by clicking that button at the bottom of your screen. Now, as industries have learned, market needs can change in the blink of an eye, and supply chains are no different. When something hits the fan, with so many different directions, strategies, everything is efficient, everything is profitable, manufacturing process couldn't be better. You know, everyone's claiming all of these wonderful things, but where do you start? Who's actually going to help you move the needle? Today, we're going to explore some of those leading initiatives that actually make an impact to your bottom line and manufacturing in the year ahead. Joining us today is Danny Ramos, Senior Product Manager here at Verusen. Danny brings a wealth of knowledge to how and why Verusen can assist the world's largest organizations with their optimization initiatives. Following Danny is Josh Ferguson, our Senior Manager, Product and Content Marketing. Josh is our insider, always keeping his finger on the pulse of the industry. If you've digested any of Verusen's fantastic thought leadership, you can thank Josh. And finally, Letty Barrett, our Senior Marketing Manager. Before joining the marketing world, Letty lived and breathed MRO optimization at Georgia Pacific, as well as a supply chain innovation think tank. Hey everyone, excited to have all 3 of you here. Look, it's Pi Day, so do you want to nerd out about math or baking? We can go both directions. Honestly, I'm pretty equally interested on the math front. I do have a science background. For those that don't know me, on the math front, there's an interesting movement surging right now to replace pi with tau, which is fairly interesting. I'd never heard of this. In fact, a colleague of mine took the time to break it down for me. By the end of it, I was full on Tau Day rather than Pi Day. However, pie is tastier. Who doesn't like to bake fruit covered in sugar and crust? So let's talk about why we're actually here, the economy. And it's funny enough, when I wrote this intro, I used a lot of generalized terms about economic shambles and potential recessions and things like that. And wouldn't you know that the economy calls my bluff and a major bank fails, 2 days ago. So while that probably won't impact everyone's supply chain equally or directly, it's certainly an indication that you should be prepared because supply chains aren't predictable. So what can we do to add predictability, balance the bottom line, and stay away from potential chaos? Let's jump right in. Josh, talk to me about nearshoring. One of the things that we can do is bring our supply chains back to us. How do we get started?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you watch the news, it's been a priority, right? I mean, we see since COVID hit, in the 80s, we had moved a lot of our manufacturing offshore as a way to save costs, outsourcing manufacturing. But, all that came home to roost when, COVID hit and, much of our manufacturing in China was seized up with lockdowns. So American manufacturers have now, started reshoring or creating reshoring initiatives or nearshoring initiatives, moving their supplier bases closer to the States in order to reduce future risk when disruption inevitably strikes again. And we'll see this grow in 2023, continue to grow in 2023. We're already seeing plants, construction building across the country, and this will continue in the years to follow.
The 80s, fantastic movies, fantastic movie, music, terrible technology to be relying on for your supply chain, right? It's 2023. Danny, I see you nodding. Are you nodding because Josh struck a chord, or are you just a huge Goonies fan? Wouldn't you know it? The Academy finally recognized it as well, gave Data an Oscar.
Yeah, well, I'll spare you all the truffle shuffle, but I definitely agree with what Josh is saying there around nearshoring, right? Like nearshoring works because it's shortening the distance between your strategic partners, whether that's customers, whether that's manufacturers, whether that's suppliers. Shortening that distance really increases the speed in shipping. It allows for tighter collaboration and communication. And it really, more importantly, allows you to react swiftly to those external crises, right? We know the next thing is coming. We don't know what it is, but we know something is coming, and nearshoring lets you handle those things. And really, it's something that we're hearing all the way from the top, right? President Biden in his State of the Union talking about bringing, American supply chains starting in America. So, I think bringing some of those resources closer to home, you might not get the same cost savings that we were seeing back in the 80s, right? But the benefits, I think, from a resilience perspective, far outweigh those costs.
Interesting. And put another way, we're dealing with risk in a new fashion, bringing everything together. Letty, I know you have a ton of background in risk with your career starting with MRO optimization. Talk to me about risk. How do you make risk a priority without just ballooning your balance sheet?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting because risk has always been important to operations. It's maybe been an afterthought for procurement teams, but over the last couple of years, it's really jumped to the priority list for organizations from the top down, because we've seen how it plays out if you don't prioritize it. So yeah, it's become more important than ever. And organizations are really needing to find the perfect balance of capital and risk, which has been next to impossible. I'd say that they are pretty much set up for failure there based on previous efforts. And, when you think about it, your facilities are in different pages, you're looking at different data sets, procurement and ops want different things. And so again, that's why organizations are set up for failure to find that perfect balance. And then, when you think about how many businesses are trying to solve that today, they're most comfortable by inflating inventory in order to reduce risk, buying, panic buying. But that's really expensive. And that's where you find yourself talking to your CFO at the end of the year, trying to explain why you're writing off millions of dollars of wasted materials because of that panic buying. And you're also seeing people do data cleanses still, trying to clean up their data so that they have hopes of understanding their data so that they feel more confident in what's in their storeroom and across their networks. But those, again, are also very costly. They're temporary. They don't really set you up for long-term success. And so I think organizations are starting to see the importance of alternative ways, that those previous methods aren't working anymore. And so instead of inflating your inventory, or instead of going down data cleansing paths, being able to reduce your inventory without impact to production operations and in an inexpensive way is really achievable now. And when you think about it, if you get visibility across your network to the materials across your network, you're really ideally multiplying your storeroom. You don't just have access to what, you can walk down the hall and see physically, but you also have access to what facility B has in their storeroom down the street, a couple hours away from you, et cetera, giving you kind of that ultimate production stability that a lot of organizations haven't been able to achieve to date.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like, if I could summarize, it sounds like visibility is the way forward. We've tried data cleanses; they're temporary, like you said. Mm-hmm. But visibility, now that doesn't just mean visibility into your own networks. Danny, you and I were talking the other day, and you mentioned the positive impact of collaborating with suppliers and getting visibility there. Can you go in on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really kind of builds off of what Letty was just saying, right? Like, if you can be more strategic about your inventory practices because you have that greater visibility, you can bring those really important supply partners along with you into that conversation. So it's not necessarily just looking for those efficiencies where you might be able to shave off an extra 10 cents or dollar or whatever on parts you order very frequently. But it's actually having those really strategic relationships and deepening them thanks to this technology and thanks to this kind of better view into what you got. So, I think a really good example, something that we heard from folks just kind of speaking to different people out in the market, working with suppliers who might be based overseas and, working with them to understand, hey, what are some of the parts that we're expediting most frequently? What are some of the parts that we're utilizing the most? And is there a way in which we can take some of that inventory that you'll have overseas and store that here, locally in the States or closer to the actual manufacturing? And those are conversations that you can have now because you have better visibility, you have a better understanding of what, kind of the state of your inventory is, so you can make more strategic decisions instead of kind of hoping and praying that you're going to make the right guess.
Yeah, I think guess is the perfect word there. Now, Letty, you've worn a few hats. You're in marketing and sales now, but before that, you were the MRO expert at Georgia Pacific. What does guessing take away from organizations? How can knowing unlock all this extra value?
Well, that's very generous to say expert. I appreciate what you did there. But yeah, I mean, I think there's just ultimately you're unlocking a whole nother level of knowledge that a lot of organizations haven't been able to achieve before. And I think, when I think about my role at Georgia Pacific and my role working with MRO, is a lot, sometimes guesswork and a lot of exporting from all the different systems, all the different conversations you have to have, et cetera. And so being able to bring it in one place, have one conversation with across the different teams, it really takes out the guesswork that's previously happened. I witnessed a lot of conversations that were had where it was, oh, this is just the way we've been doing it for several years. We're going to keep continuing down this path. The person before me did the same process. So it really unlocks a whole nother level of confidence in your data and your data-backed decisions across your network.
Absolutely. Yeah. The removing the guesswork, unlocking this extra value by using things like AI to provide the visibility. Josh, talk to me about how you can ramp that up further. You've got AI managing data, looking at data, understanding data. What does this mean for the bottom line? What does this mean for your balance sheet?
Well, so that's the thing. It's like, so as Danny was mentioning, like these suppliers or manufacturers are now leveling up. They're using these types of tools. They're bringing their suppliers with them, so their collaboration with their suppliers is increasing. They're able to do things now like consolidate their SKUs, which is now reducing costs. They're able to, establish material taxonomy that helps categorize things so that when they're working with their suppliers, it moves a lot faster. It helps reduce tail spend. It normalizes the supplier base. It builds stronger relationships and it increases productivity. So all of those things are good for the bottom line.
Yeah. Speaking of the bottom line, I just got back from a conference. Getting to the bottom line, reducing working capital, it seems to be at the top of everything. And you want to get the balance sheet nice and shiny before the CFO starts slinging emails. But it's funny how often I hear I don't know where to cut capital. I can't reduce capital without putting a plan at risk. I had 3 conversations on Friday. I can't reduce capital, but I have to by 500 million. It's going to put plants at risk. What do? You got business pressure. An issue here in 2023. We don't know how much longer it's going to last, but causing an additional challenge in how you would reduce your balance sheet. So for many, you hear lowering employee headcounts. It's the easy way to cut costs. It's also probably the worst way. You lose tons of tribal knowledge. Obviously, the cultural impact of having to lay people off is never exciting. So Josh, in your research, as you're reading some of our fantastic thought leadership, I know you've come across other strategies.
Sure.
What can you do to fix the bottom line without cutting people?
Yeah, absolutely. You never want to cut people, particularly in manufacturing. It's just the labor shortages that exist there and the lack of expertise that we have now that it's just too great to overcome. So the idea of reducing headcount within manufacturing at this point in time is just not a very good path you want to go down. But there are definitely other ways you can decrease, working capital. You can negotiate better payment terms with the suppliers. Everyone says this, said that. You can streamline your production processes and your maintenance ops to reduce some lead times and make sure you don't have the unplanned downtime. You can increase efficiency and inventory management by using, the tools that we've mentioned, AI-based tools that allow you to do intelligent materials management that helps you get more insight into your, not only just your inventory levels, but also your risk exposure, right? So which is a big thing. And you want to cut out excess material spend with a scalpel, not a machete. And these tools allow you to do that. You're not going in and just doing blanket cuts like, oh, we have to just reduce costs and we just do it quickly. And next thing we know, we've cut shortages where we don't want them. So it's being able to do it with precision with these tools now that is really the way forward.
I love that, scalpel and not a machete. But it can't be that easy, right? Letty, what are the risks?
Yeah, so I think the main conversation here is, again, to reiterate, a lot of people go to, like Josh said, cutting employees. You check on LinkedIn every day and you see what's the latest company that's done some layoffs. And really, I think the conversations around partnering with AI and technologies and really understanding that AI is not replacing people. It's really unlocking a whole new level of work that's never been done before. And I actually was working with one of our customers the other day, and she said something awesome. I loved this. And she had said, as a human, I can't look at all of the data, but with AI, I can. And so it's really just incredible what it allows humans to do in their day-to-day roles. And I think the risk here is people not being as open-minded around technology, because it is a change. It's a different way of working. But in order to not lose good talent, in order to not lay off a significant amount of employees, looking at your materials management is a really great place to start. For example, specifically your MRO or your spare parts, it's a lower risk area that you can address in order to really get some cost savings that's impactful to your bottom line, and a place to start instead of cutting employees first.
You said MRO is a bit lower risk. Can you double click on that, not to use the worst cliche ever?
Double click on that. So I think, MRO for organizations is often an afterthought, because some of the materials are lower cost. They're not raw materials that are going directly into your production and the making of your product for your customers. So that's really what I mean by that, is that it's, on the back burner in some people's mind, just because the priority is direct materials. But really, at the end of the day, your direct materials aren't going to matter if you don't have the MRO, the spare parts that you need to run your machines. And so I think there's a shift of starting to understand that MRO is important, but because it can be lower cost, it's a great place to start. Thinking about how can I, instead of having 66 of pieces of this bearing in my storeroom, maybe based on my purchase history, my bill of materials, my goods movement, usage, consumption, etc., maybe I can have 12 on hand because of all of these things that I'm taking into consideration, that the AI is taking into consideration, that I haven't been able to wrap my arms around. And so it's really about thinking about it in a different way, and knowing where you could really start to kind of build that foundation, and then also maybe optimize your direct materials as well.
Yeah, like our friends at Supply Chain Now always say, what is it? Don't let a $10 bearing take your plan offline.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So we know that layoffs are an ineffective way to reduce working capital. But another way that companies often look to utilize is they cut investment on new tech, right? They have a way that they do things, and rather than invest in new tech, they'll just double down, reduce budgets for new tech, and that's backfired. Danny, why is today, 2023, the best time to be investing rather than pulling back?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I think if the pandemic showed anything, right, it showed that you need to have a mind shift away from thinking about technology as a cost center and as a way to kind of sink money, and really start thinking about it more as a way to build differentiation and competitive advantage between you and your peers, right? Like, technology is here to stay, right? And unfortunately, we're starting to see some positive signs from the market. MHI is saying almost 2/3 of the companies that they surveyed in a recent supply chain industry report are going to continue to increase technology investments in their supply chain. We saw a pretty similar thing from a Capgemini study, where it was 40% of those businesses were going to boost technology investments. And that's really the right call, because aside from getting you out, getting you to utilize some of the kind of the latest and greatest tech, it really does indeed build those competitive advantages. And I think we saw that, right? In the pandemic, those companies that had already been making those investments in technology, had already been making some of those cultural shifts, were able to spin up and react much more quickly than those that had to learn about technology from the beginning, right? And those were reacting and introducing some of these technologies after the fact. So, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today, right? And it's much the same way with technology investment. If you haven't been doing it up to now, now is a great time to start digging into some of those advanced techs and really building out that muscle memory.
Yeah, I love that. I love the tree comment too. It seems so credible in everything that we do. One thing that you said resonated with me is it's difficult to implement this tech to create this change management, but I think it does a couple of things that are kind of not so intuitive. One, yes, it is difficult to implement change with new technology, but it also kind of creates this culture within your organization that you can shift and learn and adapt to new processes that allow you to react better in the future. It's one of those things where if you become comfortable with this adoption, with learning, you'll better react when you have the next actual emergency, So,
Yeah,
so
no, absolutely.
we've talked about AI, we've talked about machine learning and the benefits. We've talked about, improved efficiencies and cost savings that new brings. However, adopting these processes, these new technologies is not easy, right? It's not something that you can do like in an afternoon. But it's also not something that takes 6 months. Letty, talk to me about supply chain and how new tech can help organizations and what that transformation looks like.
Yeah. So, we're all hearing digital transformation and streamline and optimize and all those buzzwords that are just going to make us go crazy. But whatever you call it, it's the same concept around partnering with the right technologies, the right people, the right partners, et cetera, to really transform your business for tomorrow and the future's needs and challenges. And at the end of the day, like we talked about earlier, what worked in the 80s isn't going to keep working for us going forward. And really it's about partnering with the right technologies and also implementing the right processes. You really can't have one without the other. And I have a great example, total fail on my part, being at Georgia Pacific. I was on a bot automation project using robotic process automation and RPA technology. And, we had great technology, great concept, great project plan put together, but we didn't have buy-in from the people involved. And that was so important and such a critical learning that I learned very early on is if you don't have the team completely bought in, it's not going to work. People are going to stay involved, and they're going to want to do what they want to do. So you've got to get buy-in from the team to make it successful. And I think some executives and leaders in the industry think that, we'll just wave this magic wand of AI or technology and it'll all fix our problems. But really, it's just so critical. We have an awesome white paper on this, just the importance of having the right technology and the right processes and the right people involved. Because again and again, you see so many failed tech implementations because there wasn't the right buy-in. And again, I know we talked about it a second ago, but really just the importance of change management within the organization and doing it in a way where you're really partnering with your people to set them up for success. Because at the end of the day, you can implement all the technology, all the AI, all the fancy things that you want, but it really depends on your people to be successful.
Absolutely. And I'll piggyback off of that by saying, like a lot of times it starts at the top, right? We need the decision makers and the buyers to embrace this technology and push this cultural change. But we see all this hesitation around adopting new technology, this whole fear of messing up that we keep hearing about nowadays, because they're like, I don't want to buy the wrong solution, so we'll just keep doing it the way that we've always done it because I'm scared that my legacy will be impacted. But really, I mean, it starts not just with the tech, but again, when leaders buy in, then and implement the processes and the culture of change, of adoption and process improvement, it all works in harmony. And then, to Danny's point, we start seeing the leaders and not the laggers, rise to the top.
I love it. Yeah. Change is uncomfortable, but it is a total organization culture shift that needs to drive these things. These transformations. Danny, I know you've got a pretty technical role, but can you give us a quick education on what a successful AI implementation looks like at an organization? I know it's not just going to ChatGPT and saying, how do I do my job better?
Right. Yeah. No, although it'd be nice if it was that easy now, but to Josh's point, right? Like, I think it really starts with being able to play nicely and kind of connect to that underlying data set, right? Folks have spent millions of dollars and years of time digitizing their supply chain. So if you move to an AI tool that doesn't take advantage of all of that work, you're doing yourself a really great disservice. And so I think kind of that's the first point. The other thing that I think is really important is having a plan in place on how you're going to implement and utilize this new technology. And I think this kind of goes back to the point that Letty was making earlier, right? MRO is a great place to start because you can rack up some wins pretty quickly in MRO. So you can start to build a little bit of momentum behind a transformation like this. You can start to build a little bit of enthusiasm behind kind of the cultural shift that needs to happen. So tools like, AI-based tools are adopted and folks start to lose a little bit of the stress and anxiety that comes with hearing, AI is coming for my job, right? So those things are really important, right? Making sure that you've selected a partner that can work with your data as it is today, and making sure that you have a path forward for how you're going to implement and utilize this thing so you can get some of those wins quickly and help some of that cultural shift happen a little bit more organically than if you're just kind of forcing something down from up top without, by mandate, as opposed to showing that the results that it actually works.
Thanks for that. Yeah. All right. Well, we're at the bottom of the hour. Let's dive in. We've got some questions that have come in over the last 30 minutes or so. So before we wrap up for the day, let's figure out what people are asking. The first is, what does it mean to understand the data? How is that different from a data cleanse? Now, I believe this is in reference to something, Letty, that you said. So I'll leave it to you, and then Josh and Danny, you're welcome to fill in.
Yeah, happy to help answer that one. So without going into a technical discussion, I think, the concept there is around not just cleaning your data, cleaning up and identifying duplicate materials, for example. This is really about understanding what it means for the data that's across your network, where your materials are, when you need them, where you need them, et cetera. A lot of times organizations are so comfortable implementing a data cleanse because they think they need clean data, but actually there is a shift in the industry of, you don't really need clean data anymore. You just need to be able to understand your data. And the main reason is because when you go through this data cleanse, it's expensive, it requires a ton of resources, and it's also static. You work so hard to get your data clean, and then it's already outdated by the time it's live. And so really it's about getting a foundation of data built without a data cleanse, and just really understanding what your data means and how to use it correctly. And again, it goes back to the conversation around data-backed insights, not just making decisions based off of your gut, what people have been doing for all the past decades. It's really about making data-backed decisions that you're confident in, and that your team is on board with, and that you're all looking at the same data set, et cetera. But again, it's definitely a shift than what we've done before and what's been understood before around, you don't need clean data, you just need to understand your data in its context.
And I'll hop on top of that and saying some of the tools that we're mentioning now have the ability to scrawl this data as it exists and pull insights out of that and say, hey, we think these two things are the same thing. They have slightly different identifiers. They came from different suppliers. They're in different BUs, but they very much have similar descriptions. Are they the same thing? And then it allows a user to go in and verify it. And then the system captures that and essentially moves on to the next one. And that's something that no human being can do, just pulling spreadsheets.
Thanks for that. That actually is a great tie into another question here of, how can I be sure that AI is making good decisions? I don't want to risk it going Skynet and causing damage. Josh, will you fill in a little bit more about what you were just saying with the recommendations? AI is not making the change, right?
Absolutely. AI is not making the change, right? It is giving you the information probably that you weren't able to pull from yourself and saying, hey, this is what we think you should do. This this is our recommendation based off of what your data currently tells us. And it gives each user the ability to go in and verify or reject that recommendation. That way, the organization can take the next logical step as far as that recommendation is concerned. So therefore, it's not going into your ERP and just reworking your data for you and suddenly, firing off purchase orders to suppliers that you didn't. It's giving you complete control.
Yeah, one thing I just like to add to just reiterate what you're talking about, Josh, is also just the speed at which you can do these things. Because I think, like, when I think back when I mentioned earlier about running bi-weekly metrics for our suppliers at Georgia Pacific, I was having to do it on a bi-weekly basis. It was taking a lot of manual work, but it really was just like a bi-weekly thing. And then I also remember a lot of the category managers not able to really grab a hold of MRO in a way that they can or have access to now. And just thinking about min maxes and stocking strategies that you're not able to have access to, but on, monthly basis or biannual basis, these long periods of time. And once you do, it's again outdated and it's not relevant. And so the speed at which an evolving technology and AI and ML can give you these decisions is unlike before. I apologize, my dog barking in the background.
He's excited about data. I've got another one, Josh, for you, because I know your background with Infor. How is this different from inventory optimization from my ERP?
So all right. So an ERP it's a great tool. Every organization needs one. We're never going to say replace your ERP, right? I mean, but an ERP is a system of record, and it is a very rule-based system, right? And so it will only be able to identify materials as they have been entered into the system. So there are numerous ways that can be, disjointed, right? You got multiple instances that are lying all over the organization, right? Disconnected systems. You've got this manual data entry that can be either, depending on what supplier it came from, it's a little bit different, so therefore they won't be able to compare the two, or just bad entry, right? If we little fat fingering, and the next thing we know, we put in the wrong alphanumeric code or a wrong description, hit a wrong one, and now that thing is lost in data. So in the ERP. So, these tools now allow with the AI to scroll the data as it exists and pull out the recommendations based off of what exists in that system.
Yeah, and I think kind of going off of Josh's point there, right? Those ERPs are really well served. They're well suited for the things that they do really well, right? They don't do everything really well, but the things that they do well, they do really well. But that challenge really kind of multiplies if you think about how a lot of manufacturers grow, which is through M&A. So as you bring in a new operation, hopefully they're on the same ERP that the rest of your organization is on. But if not, that's one challenge to overcome. And even if they are on the same ERP, you have, data taxonomy differences, you have master data differences, you have all sorts of differences that you have to reconcile that just alone in an ERP, you're not going to be able to do. So that's where, to Letty's point, being able to comb through tons of data in ways that a human being just simply cannot, our brains just don't do that, right? Is really, really helpful, and where these kinds of tools can help drive a lot of efficiencies that you would never catch otherwise. You wouldn't be able to see them.
Thanks for that. And on that note, I think we're about out of time. So thank you to the three of you for joining me today. This is a great discussion. For everyone online, please look for a follow-up email from us. We'll include the recording. We'll also be sending a white paper that kind of goes into more depth on how you can find additional ways to reduce cost with MRO. Thank you very much. As always, it was a pleasure, and we look forward to speaking with everyone again on next month's Ask the Expert. Have a good day.